She got away, she got away, she got away, she got away, oh she got away, oh she got away.
Welcome to She Got Away, the show where I, Kibby Linga, share my journey of survival and healing from the depths of Satanic Ritual Abuse, or SRA. SRA is an extreme form of abuse, often silenced, where criminal activities intersect with unspeakable acts of sexual abuse. Through my narrative, I aspire to share my story to help my own healing journey, to give a voice to children being trafficked, to spread awareness, and to relate to other survivors. I believe this topic should be talked about. This podcast is for anyone with an open mind who also doesn't get triggered by evil. Welcome. I'm so glad you're here. It won't be all gloom or doom. Let's go spread some light. Hi, welcome to episode 2 of She Got Away. This episode is called From Denial to Truth, the year 2019, and I'm your host, Kibby Linga. The year 2019 is the year I had the majority of my flashbacks, and I went from denial to truth. It was a very intense year for me. I was in denial for about 17 years, and 2019 stopped my denial. Last episode, we briefly talked about satanic ritual abuse, organized ritual abuse, and what it is, some controversy around it. I gave you a brief timeline of my life, and I answered a few common questions from you guys, such as, where did they get the kids from, how did they get away with it, and what does my faith look like today? Today, we're going to dive into the year 2019, the most painful year of my adulthood, when I was going from denial to truth. I'm also going to show you some pieces of art I painted during the process that really helped me through the process. If you're not seeing this visually today, I'm going to show some of my art visually today. I'll do my best at explaining my art as I go. I'll also express why going from denial to truth was worth it for me. And of course, I'll wrap up with answering more questions from you guys. Hello to all my TikTok friends, the platform where I started sharing my story, and hi to those who witnessed my dissociative identity disorder journey or my art journey these past 5 years as well. And if you've never seen me before, hi, welcome to you too. I'm so glad you're all here. I'd really appreciate the support for my speaking out journey by subscribing to my channel and hitting like on this video. Okay, let's get into it. The year 2019. Remember, before age 9, my mother and I mutually didn't like each other. Also, remember, I witnessed the rituals from age 0 to 8. My dad got cancer when I was 8 and died when I was 9, and the rituals stopped then. After my dad died, which my mom needed him in order to do the rituals, my mom's new mission was to not do the rituals anymore, but to convince us it never happened when I was around 9 years old. I stopped witnessing the rituals at age 8, and I'm going to tell you what happened after that, age 9 and on. I literally went from age 0 to 9 when I did not like my mother. I had extreme opposing beliefs from her to the opposite as a result of denial. Going into denial made me like and even think I loved a serial killer. That's how powerful denial is. I'm a really good person and this happened to me. But the power of denial is so strong. I'm 36 years old right now. So I'm 30 years old in 2018, 2019. And I'm starting to get extensive help for this cult upbringing. I went in denial from age 13-ish to 30, so that's about 17 years. During those 17 years, I fell in denial because my mom moved us from the city to the suburbs and said we went from being religious to spiritual. Then she convinced us that it never happened. Those were very confusing years, and I, at last, fell into denial for the most part by age 13. I used coping mechanisms to stay in denial. When I was 13, it was disordered eating. I don't want to get into the specifics of that right now. I still have shame about it. I'm not ready to talk about it, but it was one of my main coping mechanisms that I used to be in denial. It was a certain behavior I did with food. Another coping mechanism I picked up around the age of 16 was compulsive running. That went on, for the most part, on and off at times, until I was 30. I was also addicted to drugs and alcohol from age 16, and I got sober at 24. From 24 to 30, I was stone cold sober, but I was still compulsively running, which sounds healthy, but I took it to an extreme where it was not, and it was destructive towards my body. And I also had a habit of having disordered eating, which was taking a lot of my time and my money. During my late 20s, I was in so much denial, and these coping mechanisms were helping me be in denial, particularly the disordered eating. It was just magic for helping me be in denial and stay in denial. In my late 20s, before I started getting help and honest at age 30, I was using these coping mechanisms and so far away from my true self. So eventually at age 30, I lined up support for myself to look at my truth. And that's what I'm going to explain to you. So let's look at the denial timeline. From age 9 to 13, my mom moved us from the city to the suburbs. Shortly after, she told us we were no longer religious, but now spiritual. She took us out of the Catholic schools or the private schools and put us into public. So from age 9 to 13, I experienced a lot of brainwashing of, that never happened, and this is your fault, something is wrong with you. It was very confusing, and eventually I fell into denial. I picked up the coping mechanism around age 11 of disordered eating. That tremendously helped me stay in denial. At age 16, I picked up drugs and alcohol. That also helped me stay in denial. I would say I was for the most part in denial by age 13. This continued into my 20s where I stayed in denial, but I was stone cold sober. That wasn't enough. I maintained the disordered eating coping mechanism as well as the compulsive running coping mechanism. At age 30, I decided I wanted to get help. I lined up support and I put my disordered eating down as well as my compulsive running down. That's when the flashbacks came up. In 2019. Before I tell you about coming out of denial in 2019, I want to tell you a little bit about the person who I was around the year 2019. So the years prior, I was in my late 20s. I felt so disconnected from myself. I felt like a robot. I couldn't find my true self. I couldn't figure out something was wrong with me. I was convinced something was wrong with me. I was confused about my own reality. I watched other people laugh, smile, make friends, be friends. I couldn't understand why I couldn't do all of that. I was so blocked off from myself, from others, from life. I wasn't the person who you see on social media today. Those years weren't my best. Those were really painful years. I wanted to live, but felt like I couldn't. And at the same time, I was living a lie, but I had no idea I was living a lie. In fact, I idolized my family in my late 20s. I thought they were all amazing people and that I was the problem. I thought my mom was the best mom in the world. That's how much denial I was in. And I was so convinced that there was something wrong with me. And it hurt. And in order to deal with that pain, I used my coping mechanisms, such as compulsive running, which felt really great, like I was running away. But I used it to the extremes where it was unhealthy. I also used disordered eating, and both of those coping mechanisms helped me deal with the pain. Those coping mechanisms worked until they didn't. And I'm so glad I put them down because that really has helped me face truth. Before we get into me coming out of denial, the last thing I want to point out that when I was 29 years old, I was starting to change and have different feelings. My intuition was starting to say that there wasn't something wrong with me. So I feel like the year of age 29, I was getting ready to come out of denial by having these feelings of something may be going on. So I listened to those feelings. So after putting the coping mechanisms down in October of 2018, for the most part, I did continue the running on and off, but it stopped quickly after. When I put these two things down, my flashbacks came up like popcorn. Like I couldn't control it. I felt like kind of crazy. Like, what is going on? There's something that I'm not seeing that's coming to light, and I'm experiencing these flashbacks that kind of took me away from life and put me back into the past, and that's when I experienced them. I was working at the time. I had a job at a restaurant. I was waiting on tables. I remember once I was waiting on a table outside. It was an indoor restaurant. And it was just this family of like 4 or 6. And I'm in a flashback seeing my mom take pliers and torture a baby to death. And my mom's face was like she was serene, like she was in a peaceful world, just doing it like she was making a blanket or crocheting. And I'm seeing this like while taking an order. I'm feeling it. It was like I went back in time too and felt it. So I'm at the table, I push it to the side. My therapist at the time told me a trick that when flashbacks come up, I can look at them as a movie and kind of compartmentalize them to the side until I'm ready to face them. Or she would give me certain tricks to help navigate through my flashbacks so that they wouldn't interfere with my life too much. But believe me, they did. I remember I was on my way to work once and I thought that I was going to like get in a crash and hurt somebody. Like, I didn't trust myself driving. I didn't understand I was having intense flashbacks come up and it was fear, and it turned into a panic attack. I called my job. I'm like, I can't come to work. I just had this panic attack. I needed help from a friend because I didn't trust myself to drive home. So I pulled over on the side of the street and my friend came and picked me up. It was because I was having flashbacks come up and I was in everyday life trying to resist them, and they showed up like as panic attacks. So eventually I was able to give myself more time to experience these flashbacks. But I was also very cautious not to make looking at flashbacks or embracing flashbacks a 24/7 thing, because my therapist also told me that doing that would be too much and possibly detrimental. In March of 2019, I had one of my worst flashbacks. At this point, I had totally forgotten about eating the human flesh. I just started remembering my family sacrificing children or killing others. I'm at the point where it's like, whoa, my parents were serial killers. I'm already in pain. But then one morning, I slept over at my friend's house the night before, and the next morning I had to work, and I went home to pack a lunch for work, and one of the things I was packing was turkey sausage, and I ate some as I was preparing it, and I went into a complete flashback of when I was forced to eat one of the victims named Sam. And that was so intense. I went back to my friend's house who I slept over at. I'm like, hey, this is going on. She's like, I was in complete sweats. I was like, this is what happened as a child. And she's like, oh my gosh, like, what's going on? And she called my work, and I didn't go in that day. And I went to the emergency room because I was in so much distress and pain. And I sat in the emergency room for a few hours, and eventually I left. But I went to the emergency room for a flashback. They couldn't help me, but eventually I embraced that flashback. For me, that's part of my flashback work of finding truth. Not only do I have and experience the flashback, but I embrace them as well, meaning I give myself time to process it, to have my feelings, to tell my support team about it or express it, and that helps me get from denial to truth. And when I get to truth, I oftentimes, if not always, have a spiritual triumph. During this time, I also remember being really confused about my truth. I was like, who would do this? I really, really, really thought I was alone. I thought I was the only one on this planet who has experience this. And a reason for that is because I couldn't find anything online. And I think a lot more has come out since 2018, 2019, but it sure took a lot of time for me to get validated with what this really is. Satanic ritual abuse, organized ritual abuse, whatever you want to call it. It took until late 2019, but I did find validation for what I experienced as a child, witnessing all these horrific crimes. I was doing research on cults and cult investigators, and I found the name Dale Griffiths, and I really wanted to talk to him. And I did. I did talk to him, and he was very validating and helped me understand a little bit of what my type of abuse is. And I'm so thankful and grateful for our conversations. He ended up passing, but I hope he knows that he tremendously helped me. It was hard to get validation while going through these flashbacks. I had a therapist. My therapist wasn't a bad therapist. She wasn't invalidating. I feel like she was a little skeptical, scared, and disgusted. Perhaps she wasn't qualified. She ended up not working out for me, and then I found my current therapist. So she was a good therapist, but she just didn't have any knowledge in this area, and I needed validation because I couldn't find it. I didn't have it as a kid, and now I'm coming out of denial as an adult. It's hard to find. And so the mental health system, they were there for me as best as they could be, but I do think that the mental health system in general is very undereducated about this topic. And since I've started my recovery, I have learned how alone I am not and how many other survivors there are like me. And I hope one day our mental health system gets more educated on the topic. During 2019, the year of most of my flashbacks, I tremendously hurt my jaw from all the grinding, the crying. I also had dental work at the same time. I still struggle from TMD. My bottom jaw was literally about almost an inch to the left. I got great chiropractic care, maintained it. I'm back in better chiropractic care again. It's been an ongoing issue with my jaw, so I actually somehow hurt my jaw while going through these flashbacks, but it was still worth it. So as these flashbacks were coming up, at the same time, I was learning and realizing that I was living a lie. And that hurt. It felt like my whole world was just turned upside down. I had so many questions, and I'll never get them all answered. I remember there was a flashback where it was so much that I realized it was time for me to cut ties from my family. They were too mentally ill. And that alone hurt so much. I know as a child I didn't like my mother, but during my years of denial, I created a life where I loved her because I wanted to love my mother. So during these flashbacks, I realized my whole life was turned upside down. I was living a lie. My mom did a really good job at convincing me it didn't happen. And during the years of 13 to 30, I created this false illusion that I loved my mom and that she was a good person. I wanted a mom. I wanted a family. And as a result, I told myself I was the problem. There was something wrong with me. It was like I was defending my family's behavior with my self-destructive behavior. Like, there's something wrong with me. I'll have there be something wrong with me to make everything make sense. I was going through a lot of grief about losing my family. I know my mom and I didn't get along growing up, but during 13 to 30, I thought I loved her. And losing my sisters, losing the whole idea that I even have a family, realizing that my family was too mentally ill for my well-being and my spiritual health, that hurt so much. So I took a week. I just took a week to cry in my apartment. Thankfully I had the time. and I allowed myself to have the feelings. It hurt so much. I was on the floor crying at times, not even able to stand up. But I knew it would pass. My feelings have always passed as long as I embrace them. All of my feelings end. They might revisit me, but they end when I embrace them. And when I embrace them, they also bring me strength or spiritual triumph. I got up eventually. I went back out in the world. I had my support. I became closer with my new friends and support team and accepted the fact that I don't have a family. I was walking away from my family. I chose to, and I had my feelings about it to the best of my ability. I believe in having feelings. The power of denial is underestimated, in my opinion. Denial got me to love my psychopathic serial killer parents. Wow, that has a lot of power. I personally think denial is a form of insanity, and the most sane people we know are the ones not in denial. I personally feel more sane the more I face my truth, the more I live in truth. Some things that helped me have my flashbacks were realizing that my flashbacks would provoke a feeling, and I could have that feeling. I could revisit it. I gave myself time to enter my flashbacks, feel it, process it, and move on. It also really helped me to express my flashbacks to my support team and to get validation from people who were knowledgeable in cults. That really helped me. Another thing that really helped me have my flashbacks was I prayed to my higher power, who I choose to call God, for honesty and for the ability to have the flashbacks. And I would do that by writing on little sheets of paper throughout the day. I used my higher power a lot to access truth. That was my year 2019 when the majority of my flashbacks came up in a nutshell. Since I have had a few flashbacks, but they have been a lot easier to navigate. I am at the point now where if I have one, it looks like a movie. I'm not emotionally disturbed. My last big flashback was in August of 2022. I'm so grateful flashbacks don't bother me the same way today. Something that helped me get through the flashbacks was I painted them. It was a great outlet for me to express my pain, to process it, and so I'm going to show you some of those paintings. The first set are going to be of flashbacks. This one is called Minnie Mouse, with a lot of purple for mystery because it was very strange, but my friend's father dressed up as Minnie Mouse and sacrificed a child, and this painting helped me process that. This one is titled The Potion. The potion is my family's word for drugging or psychedelics. This led back to all the clues that led me to believe that I was given potion as a baby, psychedelics. And actually, most of my art is similar to the visions I saw. This is one of 5 paintings about Sam. There's a lot of expression. Sam is green in personality, and he's fighting Orange and Red, who were my parents. This painting helped me come out of denial about Sam and get back to Sam, and I can't wait to tell you about Sam. I love Sam. This one's called Carnival Cats. Carnival because it's like unbelievable, and cats because my mom lured in my older sister's friend's mom. And there was a ritual where my older sister's friend, so a child, had to kill her 2 cats. And my sisters and I were in charge of making sure that none of the mess got off of the tarp. None of it did. But this painting helped me remember that and process it. This one is called 7 Souls in a Barn. It was when I remembered a ritual that was horrifying. I saw my aunt be forced to sacrifice a child. Ironically, my mom and my aunt didn't talk for a few years after that, but then they started talking again. This is my early work, by the way. I started painting in 2019, and these paintings are when I was going through the thick of coming out of my denial. Other than painting flashbacks while going from denial to truth, I also painted anything, like my feelings, my relationships from childhood, and I'll show you some of those. So this is disgust. It's brown in color. Let me tell you, when I remembered these things, I was so disgusted. This piece is a painting about my dad. It's kind of like a face. You can see eyes and eyebrows, and then he's orange in personality. And then here by his mouth, you can just see a big X because I felt like he was silenced. He was truly a doormat to my mom. This painting is called Shock of My Life because I was so shocked going from denial to truth. As you can see, it looks like it's shocking on the piece. I can't tell you how shocked I was. I couldn't believe it. This one is called Gratitude because it helps me during my recovery to remember the good things too. Those are the things that help me keep going, and gratitude is something that can help me at any time during the day. And this is what gratitude looks like to me. This painting is about my mom. I have probably about 7 paintings about her, but 2 of them have crosses in different directions because she made me very confused about religion. She extremely religiously abused me. This one's called Losing Hope because, I'm not gonna lie, while going through all this, at times I felt hopeless. But just like my other feelings, my hopelessness feelings always pass. I'm glad I went from denial to truth. I don't know if denial would have worked out for me any longer anyways. I was choosing self-destructive behaviors that were not good for my health. My health was declining. Coming out of denial and facing my flashbacks and going into truth was painful, but it was surely worth it for me because now I have integrity about having authenticity. I know how to be authentic because I know how to be myself. Finding truth has allowed me to embrace my dissociative identity disorder and overcome it to even further find myself. I was so far away from my identity in denial, and facing truth has helped me connect to my true self so much and continues to the more I heal. It is so worth it to me because knowing my true self, striving to be my true self every day more and more is what I want. That's my personal preference. Facing my truth and coming out of denial has given me the chance to be free after not for so long. Truth brings me freedom in my heart. It was hard, but it was absolutely worth it. I love truth over denial. I'm grateful for truth. Okay, on to the next thing. Let's answer some questions from you guys. Tracy wants to know the psychology behind the abuse. I don't know. I don't even know if psychologists know, but I have no idea. I have no training in psychology. I have my assumptions that are broad and only based off of my experience. I think for my mom, she was really mentally ill, and in my family, we made everything look good on the outside, and as a result, many generations didn't face their mental illness and were even in denial about their mental illness. So I think one big factor is that my mom is very mentally ill. I think my mom was really traumatized herself, didn't face her trauma, didn't get help, and then inflicted her pain onto others. Motives that she had during this type of abuse from her sick head appeared to be sexual pleasure. She got sexual pleasure from it. Maybe money, there's clues, but I have no proof of that. Power, control. I think she was feeding a compulsion, like it was an addiction, kind of like some people are addicted to overeating or heroin. She was addicted to sacrificing children. Maybe she felt like she had a duty to take on a certain role in the family. I don't know. I'll never figure her out. Even if she was studied, I don't know if she'd be figured out, but I wish she'd get studied. Another question, why did it have to be children? Why? Because they were the youth. They're vulnerable. They're easy to control. They're easy to manage. They feed a lot of sick petty's sexual desires. There's a lot of reasons why the youth. I think they should leave our youth alone. A lot of our sick people in society prey on our youth, in my opinion. Jess wants to know if we just walked around and lived normal lives. Yes, but from age 0 to 9, we were normal in public. We did the whole church thing, and then at night we were not normal. I didn't like my mom or whatever. So it was polar opposite from public to private. And then from 9 after, then things started to become more enmeshed and more stable. My mom put us in a whole bunch of extracurricular activities. We looked super normal. We were going to school and doing all these activities while we were forgetting about our past. And during those years, we looked normal. And eventually, as we all fell into denial, we were acting the same in public as private. In comparison to my childhood, where in public we would act all goody-goody, and then behind closed doors it was a lot of arguing and crazy rituals. The normalcy carried on, and my family looks very normal today. So in a nutshell, yes, we walked around and lived normal lives, except for the years during the rituals. Then we really went out of our way to appear normal, and then at home, things were the opposite. That concludes our second episode of She Got Away. Today we discussed what denial was like for me, and we also talked about what it was like when I went from denial to truth in 2019. I also answered some questions from you guys. Tune in with us next week. The topic is undecided, but if you have any questions, please leave them below, as I will also continue answering your questions. Thanks for listening or watching She Got Away, your podcast that shines light on the depths of darkness. I have linked all my social medias, my art website, and an interview I have done with Kelly Dillon if you want to know more about my story right now. Her and I talked about my horrid childhood for over an hour. That's the end of our podcast for today. When I was a child, I dreamt of telling my story and telling on my mom. I appreciate you being here. Until next time, bye.